Hello again. So I saw a video recently about something they are calling the final experiment. Now what it is a group is taking some flat earthers down to Antarctica and they're going to watch the sun. Basically, wintertime here in the northern hemisphere, summertime in the southern hemisphere. So we're getting towards the point where they will have a 24-hour day down in the southern hemisphere if the Earth is round. Now, it's called the final experiment because this is supposedly going to be the absolute proof that the Earth is round. Um, and some people actually argue about that name because, especially it's among the flat earthers, are arguing because just because we see this doesn't prove that it's round. There might be another explanation for it, which is fine, which is actually what I'm going to sort of look at today. But continue here. Apparently, a lot of flat earthers chose not to do it. Several were invited, several decided not to. And it was basically, we will pay for the trip. You just come down and you witness that this is going on. And some of them said, sure, we'll do it. And others said, let's not. So they're going to be doing this in a few days now because it's getting towards the winter solstice, which is when it would be best to do it. But I decided, let's look at flat Earth theory. Just to see, why do people still believe in this? Now, the Flat Earth Society, is there really a Flat Earth Society? And from what I can tell, there might be some people with that name, but to say all Flat Earthers are a member of it is wrong because if you watch various videos online, you'll find they disagree with each other on stuff and their explanations of things. So why did this get started in the first place? I don't know. Everyone in Columbus' day, everyone knew that the Earth was round, just about. The idea that the Earth is flat and you'll sail off the end of it was, I believe, Washington Irving brought that up in one of his stories in the 1700s. So back to 1492, Columbus was running around trying to convince people that it was smaller than it was. The Earth is small. Everyone knew it was round. However, back in his day, it took 5 to 6 weeks to cross the Atlantic Ocean, and you didn't even know there was a continent to reach there. So we're talking maybe 3 months to get to the East Indies by sailing west. And so you got small boats, you got can you store enough food for this amount of time? People believed in sea monsters because there were all sorts of unknown things out there. So people didn't want to risk it, not because the Earth was flat, but because the time necessary. Crew's gonna starve when they get out too far, or whatever, or monsters are gonna get them. So it's awfully expensive to sail around the world, and especially more expensive if your ships don't come back. So that was the big thing. And Columbus didn't run around trying to convince people that the Earth was round. He ran around trying to convince people that it was smaller than it actually was. And so, everyone, pretty much ancient civilizations knew that the Earth was round. And we can go into that in another video. And so, he made it across the Americas, and later people sailed, finally Amerigo Vespucci is credited with sailing around the world first. No, not him. He was the mapper. Who was it who sailed around the world first? Begins with an M. I can't remember now. That's going to drive me crazy. But people weren't suddenly saying, oh, look, the Earth is flat. He's lying. He didn't go around the world. The Earth is flat. No one was saying that. In fact, there's the story, he got back and he didn't account for the time change going around, so he thought that he was a day off when he got back. And so again, that in and of itself was proof that he'd been gone. He didn't just go in a circle and come back. He went around the world because he was off by a day, and he shouldn't have been. Still can't think of the guy's name. Anyway, about 100 years before Columbus even made his voyage, Chaucer in Canterbury Tales wrote, "The Earth is round." And so people knew even before Columbus that they had reason to believe that the Earth is round. The ancient Greeks knew it, and that's where most of the Europeans learned about it from. But again, that's not what I'm going on here. So then the question comes up: why do people believe that the Earth is flat? Now, I can think of two possible reasons. One is as out of curiosity. We discovered that the Earth went around the sun, and there were still plenty of geocentrists out there, and so they came up with all sorts of ideas of how can the sun go around the Earth and we still get all the observations we see. And so they came up with epicycles and all sorts of interesting things that allowed for everything to go around the Earth and for things to still appear. And of course, we continue to make observations, and so they had to come up with more and more complex systems. But so just as an experiment, mental experiment, what would it take for the Earth to be flat and for us to still see the stuff we were seeing? Just as a mental experiment, I would toy around with that idea some. Not that I believe the Earth is flat, but still, what would it take for this to happen? And then the other end is pretty much a conspiracy theory. Now, no one heard about the flat earthers. We weren't sailing around the world colonizing, the Americas, stuff like that. People weren't saying, okay, we'll go across the ocean, but we still believe it's all flat. No one was saying that. The flat earth society, or all of various groups, popped up in more recent times. Probably the last 100 years or so. Probably the last 50 years or so. And we're getting into the space program, basically. And so that's my theory, is that this goes along with the whole, we haven't been to the moon. Well, okay, if we haven't been to the moon, how can we have these pictures and hear the Earth that's round and all? And so we're going to deny that the Earth is flat or that the Earth is round along with that, because obviously your proof that the Earth is round comes from these pictures, which we've never been to outer space, so we couldn't have taken these pictures. And okay, maybe let's assume man hasn't been to outer space. What about satellites? We have sent stuff out. We have sent unmanned stuff up because the biggest argument for man not being to the moon is that we would die going through the Van Allen radiation belt, because people don't understand what the Van Allen radiation belt really is, and it wouldn't really kill you. If you stayed within it for a long time, it might do some harm, but if you just pass through it, it's not going to kill you right away, or it shouldn't. But even then, even if we didn't, we have sent satellites up to take pictures of the Earth, and have gotten pictures of the Earth from satellites. So, are we now going to claim that we haven't sent satellites up out into space? And I'm not prepared to go that far. So why would we lie about going into space? Because it's a lot of money, and so space program began during the Cold War. So if we want to do some Cold War spending on weapons, and we don't want people to know about it, we can claim it's a space program. If I want some of that money to go in my pocket, I can claim it went to the space program. So there are all sorts of reasons why conspiracies would come up about us not going into space, and then that tagging on to us living on a flat Earth. So, interesting thing I found out while doing this is the flat Earth. When I think flat Earth, I think of a map as we would see it. There's the world, and I look at that, and how can anyone believe it? Then it ends up, they go for more of a polar projection type map. Now this is hand drawn, it's not the best, I admit. Actually, it's pretty good, I think. And so normal polar projection map, which is a legitimate type of map, the equator would be along the outside, and this would be the northern hemisphere. Then there'd be like another map next to it, and the South Pole would be in, or our Antarctica would be in the center, and we'd have the southern hemisphere. And apparently, some of the flat earthers think, nope, we should do this where this is the Earth, and Antarctica runs around the outer ring. And Antarctica is holding the oceans in, according to some of them. Okay. Now this model, like I said, I normally think of your normal map, and there's east and west and north and south, and those are your borders. And looking at that and saying, how can anyone believe this is flat? Because simply enough, I've traveled, I haven't traveled around the world, but I've traveled from Australia as far as Europe, and so I've been over halfway around the world. So other people have gone all the way around the world. I'm not sure how we're going to argue that one, but looking at a flat, north at top, south at bottom, east and west at the sides, it's easy to argue against flat Earths. Now, one of these, is it easy or not? So most models I've seen, there's like a dome above it. So this would be on the table. There's a dome, and the sun sort of goes along the dome. A lot of them, the sun never goes behind the Earth. But it travels on the dome. So okay, so the sun's on the dome. It's going across. It's up here. Can't everyone see it at the same time? And this is one thing. Like I said, during the summertime here, we have the North Pole. There's the 24-hour day. And you can see that up in Scandinavia and stuff. You can see this where we got 3-month long days or 3-month long nights, or so we have seen the 24-hour day at the North Pole as well. And flat earthers will admit, yeah, enough people have seen that we accept it. Now, we've taken films of the 24-hour days at the South Pole, and they'll just say, no, those were rigged. We don't believe in those. And that's one of the reasons why some of these people, like I said, they were offered a free trip down, and they say, no, we're not going to go. It's like they think maybe they're going to be drugged and taken to some special place, and there's this projection screen and all that, and they'll be drugged and taken back out and see, we lied to you, or we proved it, but we were really lying because you were really in this special studio somewhere. So even the people who are going down there, when they come back and say, yeah, we saw the 24-hour day, other flat earthers aren't going to believe them. No, you were drugged, you were taken somewhere. So we got to prove that part now. But back to this. So there's nothing that says that the sun would have to go around the Earth. Why can't the disk of the Earth go around the sun, and it can rotate some, and so that will allow for sunrise and sunset. It still doesn't change the fact that when it's pointing to you, we should have day everywhere on the Earth at once, when we don't. Now, we can solve that problem by making this not quite flat, but sort of having it curved. So it's not a complete sphere, but it's curved a little bit. So that way, as it's moving, we will see the sun rising and setting in spots. That would answer some of the questions. It wouldn't answer all of the questions. Now, the big problem I'm having with this is, okay, first we have east and west. I look at a map, and east is to the left, and west is, no. East is to the right, west is to the left. And the sun rises in the east, and it goes to the left. Or goes to, yeah, and goes towards the west. And here, east and west are clockwise and counterclockwise. And so I'm trying to think of, is there a model where the sun is going overhead and the people up here see the sun going east to west and the people down here see it going west to east? Unless we get to the equator and suddenly we flip it suddenly. So we go, one direction, one direction, one direction. When we hit the equator, we change directions. And so this is eastward, eastward, eastward. Now we're going westward because we're on the other side of the equator. That doesn't really work too well unless we can convince people that everything works that way. Compasses don't work that well. Compasses in the southern equator or south of the equator still point towards the North Pole or toward the So east and west are the same south of the equator as they are north of the equator. So we are stuck with this same thing. You know, on this map, instead of east and west being left and right, they're clockwise and counterclockwise. And again, the sun going across. Don't know. Now I have seen one model where there is actually we got the sun out here. We got a disk of some sort going around the sun. So we are not seeing the sun go up and down the horizon. We're seeing the shadow of this disk falling on the Earth somehow, and that gives the appearance of, you know, darkness going across and light going across and day and night going that way. That would be interesting, except it would have to rotate around the sun in such a way that it's sort of we get this shadow going in a spiral around here. Because again, it appears the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and for that to happen, like I said, the shadow from this disk would have to go. But that's possible. We could have the sun, and we could have this disk precessed in some weird way where it casts the shadow on only half the Earth at a time. That would work. I guess the biggest problem with that is sort of trying to calculate the precession of this disk, just because it's you know, we get longer days towards the center at times, and then longer. You know, that could, even if it's done right, that could actually account for a full day at the southern part here too, because we could just have it precessed in such a way that the shadow is all up here. That would be one way to do it, with the exception that looking at all other astronomical bodies, we don't see this disk making a shadow on anything. It doesn't make any apparent shadow on the moon. It doesn't make any apparent shadow on any planets we studied. It only makes this shadow on the Earth for some reason. If we go back to the model where the Earth is going along the globe over the top of the thing, and then this disk is on it there, that might sort of answer it, but I'm still not seeing how that would get. Yeah, we would have to figure out a special kind of precession for this disk and orbit for it in such a way that it's the shadow centers around the North Pole sometimes and then spreads out and around the South Pole at other times. And I mean, that's still a possibility, but it would be hard to calculate or hard to imagine. Now, speaking of eclipses, so unless we have both the sun and the moon on this globe, well, that don't work because the moon would always be inside the sun, and so we would never have a lunar eclipse. We would have solar eclipses, but not lunar eclipses. For lunar eclipses, we would need for the sun and moon to go around so that the Earth can actually be between the sun and the moon at times. So that would be a possibility. It would be a little hard to look at, though, because when the Earth was between the sun and the moon, then the moon would be back here somewhere, and so no one would see it. Whereas with a normal eclipse, the moon's out here somewhere and the sun's over here some. Maybe. Might be possible. It would be very difficult to arrange that. Now the hardest part I'm having is longitude and latitude. So being a sphere, we have don't have a good sphere here. So my fist is the Earth, supposedly, and so we have lines of longitude are the ones that go north-south. Yeah. So lines of longitude going around there. As they approach the equator, they get farther away from each other. Then as they approach the South Pole, they get closer to each other. On a ball, they would do that. On a flat Earth, they wouldn't. They would keep getting farther away from each other. So if you look closely, you can see I put some dotted lines on my poorly drawn map. And that's because once we reach the South Pole, where is that? There we go. Here's South America. Instead of going directly south like out here along the bottom here, where they sort of go straight north and south if you look at a normal map, on this they would actually start to spread from each other. So everything south of the everything south of the equator should be wider than it is. So Africa, again, this is sort of an estimate. The thing with Africa is Madagascar moved from here to out here somewhere because our lines of longitude are getting increasingly further away. So Madagascar also actually moved farther away from the coast of Africa. Australia, my best guess as Australia. It's just this weird mess of which is just going to get very wide and spread out. And like I said, these are all guesses. If I had the time to plan this out, I could have drawn a better map. But I had a small circle to draw on, and I drew this in an afternoon, so I didn't have a lot of time. Um, so yeah, so get like Santiago and what is it? Argentina, capital of Argentina. Can't remember off the top of my head. They're fairly close to each other, and if you look at their longitudes, they're still fairly close to each other. If the Earth is curved and the lines move back towards each other towards the bottom. If they continue to spread out, then again the latitude or the longitude still fairly close to each other, but the distance between them should be getting farther apart. So they should actually be farther apart than, say, I don't know, possibly they'd actually be farther apart than the east and west coast of the United States, which in reality they aren't. So if we're going to believe these conspiracy that people are lying to us about this and the Earth is actually flat and there's some big conspiracy to cover up the fact that the Earth is flat, we have to believe not only are we lying about stuff we're seeing from space, but like every sailor, everyone who takes any kind of nautical reading, everyone, every explorer lied about distances, lied about latitude and longitude, because I mean, that's the part where, we can see here the ocean. Pacific Ocean is very wide on this map. Again, I have flown from Los Angeles to Sydney. It wasn't that long a flight. Or, it was longer than going from New York to Europe. But it took about twice as long. Which means the distance was about twice. Which means that this map, no, this map is either completely wrong or the pilot lied to me about the distance. They drugged me while I was on the plane and said, no, this only took two-thirds amount of time it took. I don't believe that last one. So that's it. Like I said, just the idea, I don't believe in a flat Earth. I do like the idea of playing around with what would it take to make what we observe be a flat Earth. But that's it. In about 6 days they will be there. They're planning on spending about 5 days down there because one of the people argued, one of the people who didn't go argued, NASA knows how to make clouds. So you're going to go down there and NASA's going to cover the sky with clouds and you won't be able to see the sun anyway. So they're planning to stay there 5 days, so hopefully 1 day out of 5 will be sunny enough that they can do this. They're taking multiple cameras, and they're going to set it up so that cameras will see both the sun and another camera, and that way that won't prove that they aren't messing with things, but it'll make it harder to mess with things, and so therefore we can't use the argument, well, you just doctored the film because, or you played around with the camera or whatever, because we're going to see the camera from another camera. And so to doctor the film and to play with if you play with the cameras, you're going to see it on another camera. If you doctor the film, it's going to be harder to do because you have to doctor the film on all the cameras. And so they're doing everything they can. Interesting enough, the people sponsoring this are a creationist group. So you would think, the scientists and all the anti-creationists and evolutionists would be the ones trying to prove this. They believe in a round Earth too, and so instead of trying to, okay, here's a way we can prove it to the people who don't believe in it, and that way they won't be able to argue. No, they'll just continue to mock them. Whereas it was creationists who said, okay, let's do an actual experiment and prove it. So that's the interesting thing about this is that it's these scientists, the people we would call scientists because they believe in real science, quote unquote, are the ones not doing the experiment. Uh, so I found that interesting. Anyway, I've gone longer than I expected to, so have a nice day, and we will find out the results of this experiment later.